Yo, what's going on YouTube, and welcome back to Goal Line Hockey. It's your boy Kevin Forte, and today we are taking a look at the Montreal Canadiens as we head up north of the border. As what do I think the Montreal Canadiens will do ahead of this year's NHL Trade Deadline? Guys, if you are not subscribed to the channel, please make sure to do so. It'll help us out a lot. 89% of the watch time on these videos. Guys, you aren't subscribed to the channel. What are you doing? Especially ahead of this year's trade deadline, you have to be subscribed to the channel. So, with that out of the way, let's take a look at the most hardcore fan base in the National Hockey League. And I'm not saying that lightly. The Montreal Canadiens fans always show up for my videos. They always show up to games. They have the biggest stadium in the NHL for a reason. Just saying. The Montreal Canadiens are in an interesting spot where, the expectation is, going into the year, they were kind of continuing the rebuild. And that's sort of how things have played out. And a lot of guys are available. Now, it's kind of weird because we're hearing guys that just signed a new contract being thrown in the mix. Like, I've heard Josh Anderson's name still being thrown out there. I'm like, didn't they just re-sign him? Why are we still talking about him getting traded? I don't know. Unless the offer is that great and teams just really want him that bad, I think it's kind of crazy. But there are a couple of other names that definitely make more sense that could be on their way out of Montreal here. So we're going to start off with some UFAs. And the UFAs, it's not really that big of a market here. It is Evgeny Dadonov and Chris Weidman. Dadonov has kind of had an up and down career, especially in Montreal. He's a guy that you can expect to be a depth scoring guy. Now, of course, there's always a caveat. He has a modified no-trade clause where he submits a 10-team no-trade list. He's got $5 million as his cap hit for the remainder of this season, so that one kind of hurts. And currently with his contract, he's on the final year of a 5-year deal, and he's got 13 points in 42 games, and he's only got 4 goals this season. So it's going to be tough to move Dadonov, and I would assume that's something that you could maybe even see a 3-team trade, or Montreal just retains 50% of the salary altogether. And they're not going to get very much for him, unfortunately. I wouldn't be surprised if they got a 4th or a 3rd round pick and kind of just take it and run. Same sort of situation for Chris Weidman, not in terms of his salary, but he's just a depth defenseman. But I think he will ultimately get moved here before the deadline. He's got 2 years left on his deal, but he's already 33 years old, and I could see him getting dealt just to move him. But we'll see what happens. Other guys to take a look at, Sean Monahan. Sean Monahan's name has definitely been thrown out there. A little bit lesser so recently, but we have heard his name out there. Now, the bigger problem with Monahan is he is on the LTIR. Hopefully he's back and healthy before the end of the season. But of course, there's more. He has a modified no-trade clause just like Dadonov, and he submits as well a 10-team no-trade list. So there's a lot of restrictions on what the Habs can do with some of those guys, which makes this other player much more of, I think, a priority in terms of trying to move him, and that's Joel Edmundson. Joel Edmundson right now he's got 2 years left. So including this season, he's got 2 more playoff runs. If a team that's looking to acquire him as a playoff team, they've got 2 more playoff runs with Joel Edmundson. He plays both sides, a left shot, right defenseman, making $3.5 million per season. The 6'5", 224-pound defenseman is going to be a very nice asset to somebody at the deadline, and could probably go for a first and a pretty good asset as well, like a good prospect. Probably similar to the Bo Horvat trade, in all honesty. Joel Edmundson also has a 10-team no-trade list, which is that modified no-trade clause attached. But you want to talk about the biggest asset for the Habs at this year's deadline, it is definitely the defenseman Joel Edmundson. With that said, what could Montreal look to acquire? Now, again, the only real assets that they need here, they've got the good young wingers, right? They've got the Cole Caulfields, they've got the Kirby Docks, they've got some good defenseman prospects, but I think they could add some more defensive prospects. I think that's something that they could definitely use at this point, as well as even first-round picks. This is a very good draft, and if there's any way they could get a first for Edmundson, that is a dub. I think that's really what you're looking at here for the Habs. With that said, though, I think it is going to be a fairly quiet deadline for the Habs, considering all the modified attachments to these trades with Monahan and Dadonov and Edmundson. It's going to be interesting how they kind of handle that and how Kent Hughes kind of revigorates this team. And I guess it does make more sense why we could see a Josh Anderson trade, because they don't have much else that they could really trade. You know, unless you're trading Michael Matheson or David Savard, you know, they don't really have much to give. And Jonathan Drouin is a UFA this summer. He also has a modified no-trade clause. So Montreal is going to be pretty quiet at this year's deadline. I think they're going to make some moves just to make them, in terms of like a guy like Dadonov, where you kind of have to trade him. You kind of have your hands tied. And other than that, you know, I think it's going to be a fairly quiet deadline. So let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below. Leave some mock trades for the Habs. Guys, as always, thank you so much for watching this video, and I will see you again next time.